But as I say, we're talking, I think, in this panel about the age of disruption. I want to just maybe go a little bit beyond that to talk about a revolutionary age, an age in which there's amazing opportunities, unlimited opportunities for us, not just as journalists, but I would talk today about storytellers, because journalists, media monitoring, public relations, advertising, marketing, we're all going through the same revolution. And I would like to talk about storytelling. And so while I'm talking today about the golden age of journalism, I used to say this to customers 5 years ago and their eyes would glaze over as if I had just said something in a foreign language. What I mean by this, the golden age of journalism, is that today we're living through a revolution that has changed the way, not just the way we consume news, but the way that we collect news. And this revolution, like any revolution, has its downsides. It creates chaos. It can create hate, propaganda, manipulation, lies. And what I'm arguing today is that don't run away from that. If you really want to take advantage of the golden age in journalism and storytelling, then you have to face head-on the most difficult challenges and not run away from them. And if you can embrace all of the questions that we're posing today, you don't have to come up with answers just yet. You just have to be thinking about how do I attack the big problem, not necessarily just go after the big opportunity. You're in the golden age. And first of all, let's talk about the old days, not just the golden days. I love this. This is the way that we used to consume news. We would sit down in front of our radio, in front of our television, reading our newspapers, and the journalist would tell you when to sit down. The journalist would tell you when to tune in. The journalist was the voice of God, standing, like me and Pavlina in the old days, telling you what was going on in the world. And think about what's happening today. I don't know if you have kids, those in the audience, I do. And when I look at this picture, I'm going to get you cute kids, cute cats in this presentation. My cute kid here doesn't assume that the iPad or the tablet or the iPhone is in some way revolutionary. They just accept it. It's almost part of their body. And how do they consume news? Well, they no longer are willing to sit and for the journalist to tell them when they should tune in. They want to be active. They don't want to listen. They want to take part. And they don't want any journalist telling them how they consume news. They will choose it on their own terms at their own time. So think about that revolution in the way that news is consumed. Well, I would say that's actually less important than the way that news is created in this age of revolution. So the TV broadcasters among us will recognize the first age of innovation in journalism. It wasn't very pretty, but it was better than the previous technology. We would go in the field and communicate at least with our audience directly. And something happened over the past 8 years with the birth of the iPhone and the birth of telephones. I mean, you can now, I used to have to go into the war zones of the world with chemical weapon kits, bulletproof vests, satellite equipment. I would go to Iraq, where I was in 2003, and I would have to hire 2 fixers and 2 jeeps in case one broke down. Well, today, I could collect news as a foreign correspondent, essentially with this and a good connectivity on the social web. So think about that revolution in this space, and I'm only talking now about 10 years. So journalists have in some ways been empowered. We've been liberated from all the technology that would drag us down and stop us going in interesting places in the world. And yet, just as we have been empowered and given new freedoms, we've also been disempowered. Journalists are no longer technically needed. Because if you think about it, anybody with a camera phone and a connection to a social network who's in the right place at the right time is a journalist in some senses. Maybe not a journalist, an eyewitness. So we live now in the age of the eyewitness. So not only do people not depend on us to tell them how to consume news, they no longer even need us in the collection and distribution of news. So journalism is at a really difficult time, as well as being at a revolutionary time in which there's huge opportunities. Now, I know this because I was a correspondent. This is me in the Iranian city of Isfahan. So I was obsessed. I was a war correspondent, a foreign correspondent, TV anchor. I was obsessed with Iran. Any foreign correspondents out there will know that there's always one story that gets under your skin. You can't stop thinking about it. Iran was that story. And I suddenly realized that actually you didn't need this kind of equipment. You didn't need me to tell an authentic story from Iran, because there were people out there connected to Facebook with camera phones and a revolutionary, subversive way of telling a story. This is I love this group. This is My Stealthy Freedom, a group of women who just go out there and flaunt their challenge to the religious autocracy in Iran by taking off their hijab, their headscarves, and doing it in such a way that it's subversive but fun and authentic in a way that engages better than me standing in front of a microphone. Also, take a look at this kind of photograph from the Arab Spring. This is from Cairo. Again, subversion, revolution, but done in a way that's fun and challenging and engaging. There's no way, and certainly I couldn't do that handstand myself as a journalist, but that tells you a story about what was going on in a very unexpected and engaging way. For me, the light bulb moment came as a journalist when I went to a place called Kandahar in the south of Afghanistan. I interviewed this woman, a very heroic woman called Malala Kakai. And she was the most senior police officer, woman police officer in Afghanistan. Her responsibility was to protect women who were victims of violence, sometimes who are victims of murder. And I interviewed her for 2 days. I spent 2 days traveling with her. I never forget the image of her with her hand on the dashboard of her car. She had beautifully varnished nails, but her hand was covering a handgun. And you know, that imagery, that striking imagery of somebody who's so heroic, but so ordinary in some senses. But I couldn't tell her story properly because I was broadcasting on television, where, you know, I got 90 seconds to tell her story that I'd spent 2 days collecting. Even worse, 6 weeks after I met her, she was shot dead by the Taliban. And the thing that got me that day when I heard the news was I wanted to build a documentary about this woman, but I couldn't because I couldn't get on air that night. There was some European Union scandal. And we left her story essentially to wither. And it was the greatest, I suppose, disappointment of my professional career. And I thought to myself, well, the internet, I could build a website just about this woman. Nobody would have to limit me because I could show you the entire 2 days of footage. I could tell you the story of her life. I could tell you all the things you need to know about Kandahar, the violence against women in Afghanistan, the cultural traditions that allow this. And I suddenly had a light bulb and said, wow, if I could form some form of news organization that would tell a story and do justice to the power of her story, well then that would be something I could spend the rest of my life at. So I'm a very optimistic person, as you can tell, about what's going on. But I didn't want to form my organization on hope, because that's not a great way to form any business. But I thought, well, okay, what I'll do is I'll look at all the problems that we have on social media, and just go back here to this first problem, right? We're producing so much material, 300 hours of video on YouTube. Let me just get back to that slide. Believe me, there's 300 hours of video uploaded on YouTube every single minute. There are billions of posts on Facebook every day. And the problem is that the vast majority of those posts, as this furry cat will demonstrate, have nothing to do with important news. They're about what you're having for breakfast, what your cat might be doing, your child might be doing. So clearly there's a lot of noise, a lot of useless noise. That was the first problem that I confronted. The second problem is a lot of hate. This is a British feminist group who were essentially just bombarded with the most hateful, malicious, and also murderous messages about their work. So we've got lies, we've got hate, we've also got manipulation and propaganda. This is the Israeli Defense Forces during their most recent Gaza campaign, interacting live with the military wing of Hamas. You imagine those state actors, they don't need anyone to talk to each other, they're talking together, and you will know as well that there are certain regimes around the world that use anonymous trolls and people on the internet to spread their propaganda from Istanbul to Moscow to Beijing. So there's a lot of manipulation out there. And then if we go to the next problem, we have explicit, cinematic, barbaric manipulation, like these videos that came out of the Middle East recently with the killing of journalists and aid workers. So all these problems are the dark side to this revolution. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to address those challenges with this new organization. But I also wanted to talk about one of the other really difficult things happening on social media right now is the spread of lies and the spread of misinformation. And if I can just move on, hopefully it will show you something here, where we had this example where the Associated Press released a tweet saying that Barack Obama had been injured in a bomb attack on the White House. It wasn't true. Their account had been hacked. Within about 40 seconds, this is the stock market on the right-hand side in New York. You could just see that spike downwards, all because of a lie told on the internet. Now, what Storyful is all about is trying to make sure that that kind of information data that moves markets, the kind of lies that were spread last week, for example, with the terrible tragedy in the south of France, that somebody like Storyful, an agency devoted to discovering and verifying the most valuable content on social media, might actually start stopping stories, which is not something journalists usually do, right? And out of Storyful's principles, we have formed a company that was more recently described as one of the top 50 most innovative companies in the world. The quote was, for keeping social media honest. We didn't just create a principle. The business now has gone from strength to strength, started 5 years in Dublin in a tiny office with me and a computer. Now we work for the biggest news organizations in the world, the biggest social networks. Facebook just launched a newswire last year. We power that newswire. We also manage those furry cat videos, which is a great business model. We get about 160 million views every month on viral videos that you've all probably seen from various platforms, including platforms in China. And finally, we're now working with brands and marketers and PR agencies all over the world to find engaging content that they can serve up to their audiences. So that's our story. Here's our principle. We feel that in the age of social media, news now comes from communities. And if you can find the people in the community, the influencers, the connectors, that are actually sharing the information with most authority, then you have the beginnings of the solution to the problem of lies, manipulation, and propaganda. If you can find the wisdom in the crowd to help you sort the news from the noise, then suddenly you have an answer to some of the problems I've outlined. And so in Storyful, we have what we call the human algorithm. And what I mean by this is essentially a combination of machine and human being. Good old-fashioned journalism mixed with cool algorithms and machinery. And what we do, and I'm sorry this is a bit crowded, but it's a complicated process. We start with our curators and journalists, and we're in Dublin and Hong Kong and New York and Germany and London. And they choose the sources that they think represent a topic or a location. The machine helps them rank the influence of the people they've chosen, add other people, and then start ranking the membership of that community, finding that wisdom in the crowd to help us. And when the influential people share content, we can rank them and score them higher than other people who may not know what they're talking about. On the right-hand side, it's not very clear, but this is our finance newswire. In stuff like commodities, we can tell if there's a thunderstorm in Taiwan, it may move a market in some other part of the world, and we use this community approach. So we have the community, we've ranked their content. Now the next part of the human algorithm is how do we verify? And if you know that, most of you already know, that when a content piece emerges on the social web, it has hundreds of different data points connected to it, whether it's location, it's a source. We can also measure the velocity of how that content is spreading, how quickly, to whom. We have tools like reverse image. So you saw that photograph earlier from the terrible tragedy. We can go on and check what was the first time that image was posted. If it was posted 4 years ago, we know that it's not true, because obviously this is something happened today. And all the signals go back through the machine and they end up right back where they started with the journalist, who now can write a story that has all the details that turn this piece of content into a fully fledged story with all the details you need as a publisher to move that to your audience. And that's the way the human algorithm works. But that's not enough, because in the age of social media, you need also a third element, which is collaboration. So with the help of Google, we formed what we call the Open Newsroom. And we're seeking people who know something more than we do about the whole range of subjects that we all care about, who come together literally in an open newsroom and start trying to verify and contextualize facts. In this case, for example, last year with the terrible tragedy of the downing of the Malaysian airliner, we were able to work with a whole bunch of sources to actually contextualize what was at the time a fast-moving, chaotic, and a story that lent itself to propaganda. So that's what we do. We know that we can't stay still. And I would say anybody, even with the most innovative business, always has to be thinking of what's next. For me, what's next is the second generation of the social web, which will be, I think, pushed by peer-to-peer and messaging services. I've just put up logos of WeChat, 300 million subscribers. In China, Line, huge agent powerhouse in messaging services. WhatsApp, Yik Yak, FireChat, Snapchat, and of course, the new chat service is being invented somewhere in a basement in Prague or Bratislava or Rangoon. But these are the ones that right now are revolutionizing this second wave. Storyful has chosen to partner with an app called FireChat, which is extremely popular It was in Hong Kong during their protests last year. In Russia, Alexei Navalny has used fire chat as a way of talking to a community that could be suppressed at any moment. It works without the internet. And this company has allowed us to come in and help them design ways in which journalists and activists can bypass repression to reach a big audience. So just an example of an experiment. We don't know if this will work or not. That's not the point. The point is to try. And I just want to finish off by talking about the lessons we've learned about this new audience. You showed the kid with the iPad. So what's important to them? I think there's 5 basic principles for anybody who is now trying to work out what their former audience wants. The first is they want discovery, not search. They don't want to go in and say, I have a preconceived notion of what I want to see, and I'm going to your front page. They don't want that anymore. They want to live in the social networks in their own communities, and they want to have people coming to them and showing them things they never expected. The second thing is, clearly, they want to actively communicate with you and partner with you when they care about something. They're not passive. They don't care about whether you're the mayor or you're a correspondent or you're a politician. They want their news from people just like them. They want it from people who are authentically there, who have a reason to be respected. They don't want content anymore. That sounds strange. But with so much content out there, who cares? I want context. I want you to tell me something that makes that piece of content different and valuable. Finally, this phrase, clocks, not clicks, it sounds like a slogan, but it's true. When they go in, you've all probably been asked, if you're in public relations, to make a viral video, right? It's like throwing yourself a surprise birthday party. It just does not work, because it's not about how many millions of people click for 10 seconds. It's about how many thousands of people stay with you for 25 minutes or a half an hour. So engagement is the key to success on the social web, not how many clicks you get in a viral video. And all those principles, I think, will play themselves out, but you're also asking, where's the money? So where's the business model that would allow us to work very effectively on the social web? Well, I would give this example of water. We get water free of charge, most of us. It comes from the sky, from our taps. It's there, it's in the sea. So there's no real value to the water in that sense. It's like content. There's so much of it, it comes from us at all angles. The real value is in the bottle. So when bottled water first came out, I remember people laughing that they would buy water in a bottle. What the bottle is doing is adding purification, mobility. It's useful. It's something that you would buy because somebody has done something to it to make it better. And that would be my advice to anybody starting, creating, or trying to make a business survive in this age of unlimited content, is to think about how you can make that content better. Finally, we're going to talk about disruption. I'm not sure, and we had this conversation last night, whether disruption or innovation is better. We'll talk about that in a moment. What I do know is the great Irishman, Samuel Beckett, in one of his novels said, "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better." If you are not failing, you are not learning. If you do not have something in your organization where you've given a few people the ability to take a risk and fail, then you're not prepared for what's coming next. It's not enough to take a diktat from the top and tell people to innovate. It doesn't happen. So create carefully controlled experiments in failure within your organization, and that is the secret to joining the age of disruption. And if you're doing that, and again, as I say, the next innovation disruption will not come from Silicon Valley. It won't. It will come from Rangoon. It will come from Manila. It will come, again, as I say, from Bratislava and Prague and Warsaw. And that's where the people who are small groups, tightly controlled experiments, they are at the golden age of storytelling. Thank you.